The process of healing from toxic shame can be filled with a lot of high highs and low lows. The highs of finally living aligned with your true authentic self, followed by the lows of being back in a shame spiral, an emotional flashback, and questioning whether or not you can ever completely heal from toxic shame. In today's episode of This Is a Spell, I'm sharing what it can look like and feel like during the process of healing from toxic shame, or complex PTSD, or even just healing from the inner critic. And I'll be sharing my personal experience of healing from toxic shame. So if you're new here, my name is Veronica, and my goal is to help you rewrite your story so that you can finally go from feeling like the victim of your reality to the creator of it. So before I dive into what the healing process looks like, I want to clarify some phrases I'll be using. The self versus the shame-bound self. Our shame-bound self is not our true authentic identity. Our shame-bound self is a part of us that was conditioned to believe that we were unworthy. Just like we can be conditioned to believe certain things, to fear certain things, we are conditioned by other people's thoughts, actions, behaviors, their opinions. We were also conditioned to feel shame. And that shame was a survival mechanism to keep us alive. But it's also false. It's also not who we truly are. It's a part of us that has been dominant for most of our life, right? That has been in the driver's seat. But it is simply that, a part that can be healed, that we can unbound from our identity, versus our self, which, when I say self, meaning like self with a capital S, self in all caps, self is our true authentic identity. It is who we came here to be. It is the version of us that, one, always exists within us, but especially existed before we experienced any conditioning, before we experienced any trauma. I believe that our self is the part of us that can zoom out and see the bigger picture. It's the part of us that can always see the path forward, even when maybe our ego can't. In internal family systems, Dr. Richard Schwartz describes the self as the part of us that is within everyone, that doesn't have to develop, that possesses its own wisdom on how to heal, and cannot be damaged. He found there are 8 main qualities that the self possesses. These are curiosity, calm, confidence, compassion, clarity, creativity, courage, and connectedness. And I reference his description of self because from my own personal experience, it feels very accurate. So, like I said, our shame-bound parts may have been in the driver's seat for most of your life. And, if you found this video, maybe you are in your healing journey, or you are trying to finally heal from toxic shame. Maybe you're finally realizing what you are experiencing and why you feel so bad. So, being shame-bound has led us to believe that that is who we are. But it's only a part of us, like I said. Who we truly are is our true, authentic self. We are meant to experience joy, to experience, curiosity and that calm feeling within us. We're meant to be confident and courageous and connected to others. Whereas shame makes us feel small and disconnects us from others because shame tells us to hide. We can heal our shame, and we can start living from a place where our self is primarily in the driver's seat. In 2001, I discovered that I had complex PTSD, or CPTSD. Trying to get in the habit of removing the D because it's not a disorder, it is a coping mechanism. It is the way our system adapts to keep us alive. So, complex PTS. Since then, I've been on this journey to heal this complex PTS, and it's been what has felt like a slow journey at times. But when I look back at how much progress I've made, over the last 4 years versus, the 10 plus years prior of trying to heal and not realizing that I had complex PTS, it's actually been a very rapid healing process for me. And I had a friend recently ask, what I wish I would have known years ago. And my answer was that I wish I would have known to focus on healing the toxic shame. I've made the most progress, as in completely shifted my identity, completely shifted my mental health within that year. I spent really focusing on healing toxic shame and learning all about it versus the time that I'd been trying to heal my complex PTS as a whole, or just focusing on, my attachment wounds. After uncovering toxic shame and starting the process of healing and releasing that shame, there can be a lot of highs and lows, like I said in the intro. And I first want to look at it through the lens of self-concept. When we have attachment wounds or complex PTS or toxic shame, our self-concept is warped. We tend to see ourselves much differently than how other people see us. It's hard for us to see our good qualities. We usually doubt our abilities, or we don't even recognize our abilities. We can't accurately see what we are capable of and all of the good qualities that we possess. So when you have the experience of finally living from your true authentic self, you start to see what you are capable of. You start to see all of the good qualities that you possess. You start to actually have confidence in yourself. And this leads to finally having a congruent self-concept, right? So when our self-image is aligned with our self-identity, that positively influences our self-esteem, and we have this congruent self-concept. So that boost of self-esteem, I feel like powers us through being able to finally go after what we desire. Gives us the confidence to be able to take action, to see ourselves in a new light, to speak more kindly to ourselves. But because progress isn't linear, our inner critic sneaks back in, something triggers us to experience an emotional flashback, and that self-doubt comes back. We start doubting our capabilities again, start questioning, if we're capable of achieving what we desire. And because our self-image has shifted and again has been clouded by this toxic shame, our self-concept therefore becomes incongruent and our self-esteem takes a hit. In the beginning of the healing process, at least from my experience, because we haven't been used to living from our true aligned authentic self, these experiences may be short. It may feel like these short bursts, and then we're quickly back in that toxic shame spiral. And it's really easy to slip back into believing what our toxic shame tells us, because that's what we're used to. So for me, in my experience, going from being in self back to this inner critic shame spiral, I started questioning, like, am I crazy? Like, I'm not actually capable of that. There's no way, and I would really believe what the shame was telling me, what my inner critic was saying, because that's what I was used to the majority of the time. I would believe the stories I was telling myself of, I'm not good enough, I'm never going to reach my goals, there's no point of trying, and so on. Once we start to have these periods of experiencing what it feels like to live in self and not be bound in toxic shame, it feels so good. It feels like such a relief. But I feel like it can make the shame spirals feel even worse because, we finally experienced that high, which should be the way we are living most of the time, but we're so unaccustomed to. Now we're back in this low and feeling awful about ourselves that it can almost feel worse because we've had that experience of how good we can feel. So I maybe wasn't necessarily spiraling as deep. Maybe the inner critic wasn't quite as bad, but it almost felt worse because I had that experience of feeling so good. And then I would start to question, well, what happened? Why am I back here? What triggered me, or what did I do? And almost blame myself, or shame myself, because that is what shame has taught us to do, to beat ourselves up and to blame ourselves, when in reality, it's not our fault. We just haven't healed that toxic shame-bound part of us yet. And again, a reminder in case you need it, that shame began as a survival mechanism, right? We took on someone else's shame. We became shame-bound because someone else was shame-bound. And as a small child, we need to identify with our caretakers for survival. That is what we do. We still need to get our needs met. We blame ourselves for what happened because we were too young to realize that it wasn't our fault. So, this is our brain's way of surviving. So, unfortunately, it's not an overnight healing process. I also want to touch on how this spiralic healing process can impact us when it comes to reaching our goals. Because for many shame-bound people, it can feel really challenging to create the reality that we desire, to manifest what we want. For years, I felt like I was doing all the right things to manifest, to quantum leap, but I wasn't seeing any results. And this is why I feel so passionate about talking about shame. And I'm working on creating my course, The Foundation, which is the jumping off points it's about creating that solid foundation of an identity built on self-love and self-trust in order to be able to quantum leap and manifest. Because when we are shame-bound, we are lacking that self-love, that self-trust. We have been weighed down by this toxic shame, which makes it close to impossible to really manifest anything or create the life that we desire and deserve. When you're in self and you feel confident, you feel calm, it's easier to take action and work towards your goals. It's easier to feel optimistic, right? Going back to those 8 C's that Dr. Schwartz identified that describe the self, we feel confidence. We have clarity around what we want to manifest. We have courage to take the action to work towards our dreams. When we're living from self, it is much easier and things feel possible for us. So we can really make progress towards our goals. When that inner critic comes back, we start to really doubt ourselves and doubt our capabilities. We start to feel maybe pessimistic again, or, we no longer have clarity. So we don't know what decision to make, what direction to go in, what to focus on. We start to really doubt if what we desire is possible and if we can ever achieve it. I know for me, it was always the story of nothing's going to change. Nothing will ever change. Like, this is it. But the truth is things can change. Things can definitely change. We can heal that shame-bound part of ourself. We can live a life where we are living from self the majority of the time and very minimally, if ever, back in that shame-bound part of ourself. This video is mostly just to share my experience so other people know that they are not alone, but I think one of the best things we can do when we are experiencing, that emotional flashback, the inner critic is back online, is to just hold space for all of the emotions coming up, right? Because all of those emotions that we've been repressing, all of that pain, it needs to be felt so that we can transmute it. We cannot quantum leap to the life we desire if we are still holding on to all of that pain, all of that shame. We need to really allow ourselves to feel it so that we can work through it and release it. If this resonated with you, I hope this was helpful. Even if all you take away from this is knowing that you're not alone, you are not the only one who has experienced toxic shame or is experiencing toxic shame, and it is possible to heal, to shift that inner critic to an inner cheerleader, and to release that shame-bound part of you. Identity is everything. Identity is the foundation when it comes to creating the life that we desire. And if our identity is still bound up in shame, it's really hard to create what we desire. But it is possible to shift your identity. If you resonate with what I've talked about in today's video and reality creation or manifestation has not worked for you in the past, I invite you to join my free course and free community, Aligned. Aligned is a free course that is all about the basics of reality creation and specifically about how our identity is everything when it comes to creating the life that we desire. This is my entire first step of reality creation or quantum leaping. So in this course, you will not only learn the basics of reality creation, but you will also get really clear on your current self-concept and the self-concept of the version of you that is living in the reality you desire. So you know what to focus on when you create your next reality. I also cover what sabotages our self-concept, so what can block our manifestations. Hint, shame. Toxic shame is one of them. But I explain how these things sabotage our self-concept and prevents reality creation or manifestation from working for us. So if you feel called to join, I will put the link in the description below. Thank you for listening or watching. This is a spell. And if this video resonated, I hope it was helpful. I hope you feel seen. I hope that you know that you are not alone when it comes to healing your toxic shame. So until next week, remember, you are worthy, you are loved, and you are so capable.